The 2023 NFL Draft tight end class is looking like one of the strongest position groups, and that's because of guys like Dalton Kincaid. Today, we're going to take a look at why Dalton Kincaid is a future fantasy stud. Let's get into it. What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Debbie Royale YouTube channel. I am Christian Williams, and today we're going to be doing another 2023 NFL Draft prospect profile. We've been doing these for a couple of months now, so make sure you subscribe, like, comment, all of the above. Today, we are talking about Utah tight end Dalton Kincaid. He hasn't really been talked about as much as guys like Michael Mayer, even Darnell Washington a little bit. There's a kid out of South Dakota State, Tucker Kraft, that's getting some buzz right now. But I think Dalton Kincaid is as good as some of those guys. Now, Dalton Kincaid is definitely a taste type of thing where some evaluators aren't really going to love everything that he does, but some evaluators are going to see him and the pass catching potential that he has. And that's what we care about for fantasy and for dynasty. And so today we're going to take a look at all of that. If this is your first time doing this or watching one of these videos, we talk about the numbers, we talk about the scouting report, and then we talk a little bit about some pro comparisons and what the upside can be for fantasy football. So let's get right into it. Dalton Kincaid by the numbers. So 91.8 PFF receiving grade in 2022. Very good mark. Everyone kind of knows that 90s are pretty rare for Pro Football Focus receiving grades. And Dalton Kincaid had a fantastic season. Let's get into the next one, though. 1999, that was the year he was born. He is an older prospect. That doesn't matter as much with tight ends, but it is worth noting that he was a fifth-year guy. Started his career at San Diego State, wound up at Utah, and then it kind of took an injury to Brant Keithy to really step into the offense. Now, he was a big part of the offense last year, but he took on a larger role when Keithy went down with injury this year. So I think that does matter a little bit in terms if you're looking at analytics and breakout age and things like that. I don't actually know what his breakout age was because I don't really look at that for tight ends personally. But 1999 is the year that he was born. But from an analytical perspective here, 2.42 yards per route run in 2022. That was second only to Michael Mayer, a guy that we already mentioned, but Michael Mayer was 2.44. So Dalton Kincaid was right on pace with what is largely regarded as a top 20 pick in the 2023 NFL draft already. So very fantastic season from Kincaid. And then 16 touchdowns in the last 2 years. He has a knack for the end zone. He does a really good job finding the end zone. And obviously that was part of Utah's offense, but a lot of the time this was him creating and this was him, finding his way to the end zone rather than running a route in the end zone. So uh, Kincaid, by the numbers over the last 2 years at the Power Five level, has looked fantastic. He has been a very major piece of the Utah offense, and I don't think that Utah would have had the success that it had Kincaid not transferred in. Now, I say this: the Rose Bowl just happened. If you're watching this when or shortly after this releases, and we kind of saw what the Utah offense was. Now that was also without Cameron Rising, but Dalton Kincaid made a big impact to that Utah football team, and they're the Pac-12 champions. So worth noting. Let's get into a little bit of a scouting report for Kincaid because I watched his film and I expected one thing and I kind of got another, not necessarily entirely, but Kincaid, he was a no-star prospect out of high school. So when I turned on his film, I was like, oh, okay, so he's going to be like a fine athlete. What I've kind of learned in doing this over the last couple of years is that tight end athleticism, tight ends can come from nowhere. We think of Greg Dulcich last year. He was also a walk-on at UCLA. And so when we're talking about Kincaid, I was expecting to see kind of a subpar athlete that was just really good at the technical stuff. But what I found is that he's a good athlete. He's a very, very good athlete that really contributes to that yak ability, helps him with his route running. So a lot of his strengths are tied to the fact that he is a good athlete on the field, and he's very much so an NFL level athlete. He's fast. Let's just go right into the route running. He has got a lot of wiggle. He is a former receiver, I believe, in high school, and that kind of showed up there because he's got a lot of wiggle at the top of his routes, at the top of his breaks. He does a really good job in creating separation, and that's something that not all tight ends can do. Even Michael Mayer is a good route runner for his size. I prefer tight ends kind of like Kincaid that in terms of fantasy and what we're looking at from a pass catching standpoint, he's a more refined route runner or a more he gets open in a way that is more clear to see. So even if Kincaid goes to a team with a young quarterback that might not know what NFL separation is just yet, I think he'll be fine because I think he creates enough separation and I think that that's going to translate to the next level. Um, and then once he gets open, he has very strong hands. He is really good at high pointing. That was one of the main things that I took away from his film is he goes up and he gets it. He's very strong with his hands at the highest point. That's something that not all tight ends can do. I think of, Jelani Woods last year. That wasn't something that he consistently did, but he was still drafted really highly. And Kincaid kind of does all of that. He is kind of an acrobat for the position too, in terms of what he can do when the ball is in the air. I really like his receiving output. Now, I know all of the strengths kind of lean into the receiving ability, but from a yards after the catch standpoint too, we want to talk back about that athleticism and what he is able to do once he has the ball in his hands. He's not just a I'm gonna outrun you type of guy. He's creative. He is creative in getting yards after the catch, and that is something that I believe NFL teams are going to covet. And that's the reason I think he's going to be a day 2 pick. I think he's probably going to be a top 75 pick, maybe a little outside that range. Like I said, this position group is very strong. So it's kind of tough to see. It's more of a flavor thing, as I also mentioned earlier. But I think a team is really going to look at Kincaid and say, look at what he did at Utah. Look at how we want to use our tight ends. Let's go get that kid. On the weakness standpoint, there are times that he lacks physicality. It's not always on his film, but there are times that he can get pushed off his route, pushed off the ball when he's blocking. I think a lot of the things that he'll need to work on revolve around blocking. And I say this as someone who came away from his film saying he is a much better blocker than I anticipated. Because when I thought of Dalton Kincaid, I see the receiving numbers, I see kind of what he's able to do. But when you watch snap by snap and see how he's willing to kind of get physical, how he's willing to, be a puller on a run play, on an outside zone play, for example, I think that he does a really good job. I think that he at least has technique and technical skills. And then I started thinking, well, of course he does. He was the tight end too. They kind of used him in that way before Keithy went down entirely. And then we got to see his full slate of receiving ability. So those are just some things. Now, I say all that. He does need to work on that. If there's one thing that NFL teams are going to nitpick, it'll be his blocking and his physicality, even through his routes. But overall, as a receiving weapon, I think that he's one of the best tight ends in this class. He's currently my tight end 2. I haven't evaluated as many guys as I would really like to at this point at the tight end position, but I don't see someone overtaking him because I do think that he is one of the top 20 prospects in this class on just or like raw ability. Now, obviously, positional value comes into play if I were making a big board, but I think Kincaid is a special talent that can be a really nice impact player. I think, he could be a Pro Bowl tight end at the NFL level. I think that that's kind of an outcome that would not shock me. So, in terms of what we're looking at from a player comparison perspective, I, it's tough because I think there are times I see like Atlanta Falcons Austin Hooper, where he can be a really nice possession tight end, but I think he has more verticality to his game as well. And so I start to think, well, Robert Tunyon, the year that he had before the injury and kind of how he's come into this Green Bay offense, I think with him being a free agent, I think the Packers would be a really nice fit for Dalton Kincaid, assuming that Aaron Rodgers is still there next year. I do think that that's a similar play style where he can stretch an offense and he can also win on the underneath stuff and create yards after the catch. He's a really good athlete. I think he's probably going to be, an a +8 eight or above relative athletic score, which is really what you're looking for tight ends. Non-athletic tight ends just don't do very well at the NFL level. We've been burned by them before. I don't think Kincaid is going to be that type of guy. I think he's going to test really well. I think he's going to shock some people with how fast he runs. And I think you see a lot of that on film too. So I think that we're looking at a really good dynasty asset. I titled this Future Fantasy Stud, and I believe that. I think that he is going to be a fantasy tight end one at some point. And I think that with the current landscape of things, I think you can probably go into next year and hope that you can rank him there. Trey McBride was ranked there. He had his breakout game recently. I think it may take some time because to be on the field at the NFL level, you have to be able to block consistently. But I think that once all of that kind of fleshes out, I think Dalton Kincaid has an outstanding amount of upside. And that's why I'd rank him right behind Michael Mayer. And I think that they are very close as prospects. I think Mayer is more physical. I think that Kincaid is faster and better after the catch. I think they're both really good with the ball in the air, but I think you can talk about Dalton Kincaid in that same tier as Michael Mayer. And so in tight end premium rookie drafts next year, I think we're going to be looking at a really good value because I don't think that people are quite onto this. Now, of course, landing spot's going to matter, things like that. We know all that. But I do think that if you can get Dalton Kincaid in the middle of the second round in rookie drafts instead of spending, a late first on Michael Mayer, I think that's a plus EV move right there as a dynasty manager. So that'll do it for this one. Again, guys, drop a comment. Let me know who you want to hear about. I don't, I've talked about a lot of skill players. I will get back into the non-skill position players, but I do want to hit this stuff because rookie drafts are on the mind, and if you have a player or a prospect that you want me to talk about, drop a comment. Make sure you like and subscribe if you liked what you heard today as well. We post a video every day, so I don't think that will be a bad move for you if you subscribe. So. And as always, if you're looking for more content, we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/the Debbie Royale. Check that out if you so feel inclined. Next week, I'll be back. I'll probably have one again this weekend. And then I'll be back next week with another prospect profile. Thank you guys for watching.